Council, any questions?
One question. Shared services agreement certainly could help us meet our spending cap because we can move dollars to outside the cap. Is that correct?
I would want dozens of them.
Right. So
Dozens.
the more the better.
Yes.
Now, we had some discussion about some possible shared services in the past. Any of them that we can talk about now for 2009?
Yes. In the municipal court, we're currently leasing space. It's not technically a joint court. Their court administrator in Florham Park is retiring in June, late June. The goal is by July 1st to actually be operating a joint court in rented space in Florham Park, which will then migrate to Hartley Dodge when we finish the restoration. We've also engaged in substantive discussions with Harding Township and two other communities which haven't been announced till now, and we must talk about it now, Hanover and East Hanover. And the goal would be is that we would have a regional court, and our judge and our facilities would be the host community. We'd have 5 participating communities. The benefit for Madison would be a higher and significant use of the Hartley Dodge restored court facility. Instead of 1 day a week, would have a more full-time use. And we think we would recover about 80% of our operating costs. Right now, costs to operate the court are approximately $400,000. So if we, in theory, just allocated out 80% of the cost to the 4 participating communities, we take 20, they take 80. It will get more complicated based on volume and how we allocate out the cost. We would be net positive cash $300,000 or so in terms of reduced operating costs or additional revenue by doing that. We're also pursuing, because we lost Long Hill Township, I'm involved with negotiations with the community that doesn't want to be identified publicly, to switch now, and it's a significantly larger community than the one that we lost. And we're at an embryonic stage. They're not happy with their service provider, and we're going to pursue that aggressively to try to replace what we lost in Long Hill with another town at a larger degree. We contract now with Milburn for our tax assessor. We have a full-time tax assessor. We contract her out 3 days a week to Milburn. They pay 60% of her salary and her benefits. We have a shared service agreement with Chatham Borough for construction services. So when our plumbing inspector is out on vacation or at a conference or a construction code official, they cover for us on an OP basis. When they're conversely away, we cover for them. Each town still retains jurisdiction, does the final inspections, issues the permits, retains the revenue. So it's a no-cost sharing relationship. We obviously have engaged in a very significant relationship with the Board of Education on sharing of resources, fields, equipment, personnel. We're exploring joint insurance with the possibility of pooling our workforces for insurance purposes. And we're open to any type of shared service that we see a benefit to make. We save cash, it's just a swap of manpower or female power. It's not cash. It saves us money having to go out and hire an inspector, so it's a cost avoidance.
So that's not something that we can move that outside the cap?
That's correct. Our health contracts are outside the cap. At Milburn, we've set up a shared arrangement. We're trying to get our rent payment to Florham Park identified as a shared service, and we actually execute a shared service agreement, and this governing body has the resolution saying it's a shared service. So we're trying to get our auditor in the state to recognize it as such, and we'll migrate to a real joint court.
But if we're talking about July 1st, that's not going to help us with this one.
It has the potential. I mean, the issue, the roadblocks are once that employee leaves, because we're displacing one administrator, we've got to get AOC approval, the assignment judge prove that we can handle this in rented space. There's a few more. It's not as simple as just pulling a switch and we start. So we've demonstrated a successful operation now, and the Superior Court's happy with the operation. So we think we're going to be okay, and our ultimate goal is actually we would become a violations bureau for Florham Park, so their residents would actually come here and we get an additional fee, and they would actually phase out their whole operation. We captured their space for the police department, and this building, and then Hartley Dodge, we would have this very large court. Dover just did it recently, and they host for 5 communities. It's been very successful at the start, and we hope to follow that model.
Thank you.
For 5 towns or more. So our residents don't have to travel, which is the great thing, and our residents will benefit. And any revenue that we generate through our police department for tickets and fines is retained by the host community. So
Mayor, I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Apologies first to the mayor and council for my tardiness. I was otherwise detained. Apologies to the public. Robert, I'm looking at your assumptions page. A couple of questions. First, I don't see the fire department or DPW. And I guess a question is, why not? And then a second question is, can there be further cuts made in the police department bucket?
What are you alluding to as fire and DPW? Is there
Well, there's
something
there-
that we don't know about, or?
Just sharing the pain, is that?
If we're going to distribute the pain, for example, the library is being hit, police is being hit somewhat, et cetera, then I just asking why other departments aren't on here. I'm not suggesting they can,
Oh, I
but
thought
I'm
you knew,
asking.
but I'm just asking if you had some suggestions or
No,
whatever.
well, I haven't seen it
All right,
specifically
Dan,
yet.
let me answer that. In the case of police, I held the overtime at $192,000, which they spent. They budgeted for 210, they spent 192. My recommendation with Ray is that's what they get. Fire department budgeted 106, spent 103, asked for 120. My recommendation is 103. That's what they spent. Public Works has collectively significant savings, primarily due to termination and hiring at much lower compensation. And the overtime in 2008 was budgeted 84, spent 50. Prior years was much higher. I'm budgeting 60. So there was, in the case of Public Works, there is some givebacks as well as vehicle maintenance because of the mechanic being replaced from a much higher level to a lower level.
What about fire?
I took no action there.
You said overtime or something, you cut them back to what they had used. Yes?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is correct.
And part of where I'm going is and this is premature probably because we're just starting the process, but you're anticipating almost a 10% tax increase for the public. I understand why you're asking for it. The numbers support it. But that's a large increase for the public to swallow. If I asked you to make the numbers work for a 5% increase, the only way you're going to do that is to give me further cuts. And I guess where I'm going is, can you get those further cuts and where would they be? So, for example, we have a police department, and I'm just, of 35 officers that would be proposed to be reduced to 33. Do we need 33? And I don't know the answer to that. But I think those are the kinds of questions. These are serious times. Your numbers are right. I know where you're coming from. I know where you're going. But I think the situation is serious enough that we have to ask fundamental questions, and not just a question of overtime. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the day, it's for the public to decide whether they want reduced services or will bear the burden of the increased taxes. But I, for one, wonder whether we ought to be at least pursuing an alternate budget.